Well, I apologize. I'm coming back a little bit later than intended. I had planned on being back about 3 weeks ago, but the reentry from our incredible adventure to Alaska was a little difficult. The trip was both a near midlife breakdown and incredible, unexpected, amazing spiritual awakening. All that and then some, and a lot more. And so I had to kind of come back to reality and reel it all in. I'm Nikki Lynchase, and this is my podcast, Adult Chicken, and it's about our adventures, our journey navigating life's unexpected as a mom to two special needs kids. Alaska. I had always wanted to go to Alaska, to be completely honest with you. I'd always wanted to see the scenery. I'd always heard of people going on these incredible cruises and seeing everything that you see from a cruise ship, and I thought I wanted to do that. It was on my bucket list, I think, for sure. And when I had surgery in July of this year for my ankle, they gave me those wonderful medications that made me feel really relaxed, made me feel kind of wealthy. So I thought, I'm going to treat myself for my birthday. I don't think I really thought about it. I just did it. I bought us three tickets, and that was the plan. I didn't think much about it at all. It was kind of a surprise, as much of a surprise to the kids as it was to me that I bought us a trip to Alaska. And I did do it thinking, and I was conscious enough to know that the intent was I would enjoy the scenery. My kids probably would just enjoy the activities, and that would be sort of the happy medium. And we'd been on cruises before. I like the idea of a cruise because I grew up with parents told me that a cruise is a floating holiday in sort of a way to rebel against my parents. I've gone on a few cruises with my kids before. Originally, I thought it'd be a great idea because it's it's always been tough for me to travel with the two kids and really enjoy myself. It's not relaxing at all. I almost rather be home in my little comfort zone and not go anywhere. And so when I first decided to adventure out and take a trip, it was on a cruise. I thought, we'll be contained on a vessel. And I enjoyed it. We did it 3 different times, 2 short trips from Southern California to Mexico, and then one to the Caribbean. That was a little bit more extended. I will say, I think it was because I was enjoying and indulging in adult beverages that a lot of details of a cruise were missed that I was a lot more aware of on this trip. Maybe a lot more, a little less forgiving on this one, being so aware, and also kind of maybe springing the trip on myself while under the influence of surgery drugs. I don't know, but it was a little different. I have to admit, I think there was a little feeling of this isn't just my parents weren't actually wrong. This isn't just a floating holiday, and this one seemed like kind of a floating Motel 6. But I'm thinking that we'll all enjoy this a lot more, and it'll be different. It'll be a different experience. They're older. I didn't plan, I didn't think we'd have too much problem anybody getting lost. I'd had the experience of losing Sandler on the ship. He was in the conga line 1 minute, gone the next. I remember thinking it was very impressive how quickly they sort of Operation Sandler to find him. I mentioned, I had to alert the cruise people that he was gone, and my biggest fear was that he had jumped off. If anybody had no fear and liked to climb everything and jump off of everything, it was Sandler. And I was no, not a little. I was terrified. I was nervous. It was scary. But I alerted the people on the ship. They said they'd call him on the loudspeaker. I said, well, he is hearing impaired. So they quickly printed off his picture, and then just everybody went out to look for him. And it felt like hours, but it was probably 15 minutes. It might have even only been 5, but it was one of the most scary things ever. And they located him. He was frolicking in some other little pool on the ship, probably one he wasn't supposed to be in. But I thought, they're older now and they can enjoy everything on just a different level. And it was interesting. I didn't know a lot about what to expect, even looking up the weather. So, I packed what I thought we would need, which happened to be a lot because the weather could be a couple extremes, and thinking we're on a ship and it is summer and we're going to need our suits, but yet it could possibly rain the whole entire time. I wanted to be prepared. And one of my favorite things to put in the suitcase was Sandler had requested he wanted a tuxedo. And I guess I can say this now that we're back safe and sound was seemed so Titanic of him, to be honest with you. And it was so endearing. And I thought, I'm going to get you two tuxedos. What kind of 15-year-old kid requests cruise formal wear? Heck yeah. So I packed up, picturing us just the perfect little family dressed up going to these elegant evening dinners. And I, the pipe dream of the cruise. I had a very high expectation for what we were about to experience. But then at the same time, because there was so much unexpected, maybe there wasn't a whole lot of expectation in a way. I didn't know what to expect, but we were going to have fun no matter what. The morning we departed, everybody was up first thing in the morning. Just that fun feeling of we're on our way for the best adventure ever. There was no problem waking anybody up. Everybody was up and dressed and ready to go. And we got to the airport, get through security. We're there on time. They've got enough time to eat at McDonald's. There's something very exciting to my kids about eating at a fast food place where a fast food place isn't expected. And boom, we run right into a family that we know. And it's a couple, and they're taking their one of three sons, the eldest, who was in a class. He was in Bootsy's elementary school classes, and they were taking him to Ole Miss. So he was off to college. And I immediately stopped in my tracks, and I had to pause. And I hadn't thought about it for quite some time. And this is the first time in a while it had happened. I kind of scathed over it with Bootsy being a senior this year. I usually celebrate, we'll do our own prom. We'll do kind of our own thing to mark those monumentous times of development, if you will. And when she became a senior, we were so off with COVID happening. And then we had implemented life school. We've been doing life school since COVID happened. No one ever went back to school or regular school. And rather than call it homeschool, because I'd rather chew glass than admit that I'm homeschooling my kids, call it life school. And when she became a senior, I crossed that bridge of my future that my kids probably wouldn't be going to a university or going to college. And I was okay with that. Not at the beginning, but once we kind of were on our own set program, I just got into it, and it was fine. It was totally okay. We got there, and I got there, and I had not really celebrated or made a big thing out of her becoming a senior, but I'd let her know that the first year at University of Life School, we were going to celebrate by going to semester at sea. It's kind of how I had to gear myself up. I have a lot of friends whose kids are going to college, or this is their first semester at college. And it was an interesting thing. It was perfect timing to be going on this trip and staying off of social media just to not feel like I'm missing out on anything, I suppose, or feel like she's missing out on anything. We had adjusted senior prom, and we'd gone bowling that night, and we had adjusted so many proms and school dances that she didn't want to be part of and wasn't part of by making up our own thing or having our own dance, having our own proms at home or parties, and kind of just sailed over the senior moments. And yeah, I saw them pop up all over the place, and I saw everybody celebrating, and we were fine. We were so busy. We were just fine. And we ran into this family, and it was interesting. They were taking their son to Ole Miss and across the country and dropping him off at college. And here we were, the three of us, on our way to hop on a cruise to Alaska. And I was glad we were going somewhere that I felt equally as exciting and unexpected, and sort of the anticipation. Of course, it wasn't dropping a kid off all the way across the country and coming home without. But it was exciting to see that their son was off to college. And they also had told us what to do in Juneau because that was the one port or the one stop we were going to be at that I didn't have anything planned. And so they had told us to go to this bar. They said, you have to go to this place called the Red Dog Saloon. And I thought, that's perfect. We didn't have anything planned for there. So we said our goodbyes, which wished each other luck. And it was it was wild. It did tug on my heartstrings a little bit to see somebody her same age on his way to college, ready to embark on something totally different than she was getting ready to enjoy and experience. We get to Seattle. The trip was a round trip from Seattle to back to Seattle. We get to SeaTac Airport and we I navigate getting us on the train, which I was terrified to do that, but that worked out well. A really good friend of mine had told me the best way, arguably, to see Alaska is on a train. And I realized when I was doing my little research and trying to find things for us to do when we ported places that there weren't any trains where we were going at the various stops where we were going in Alaska. So I had decided my kids they were none the wiser, and you know what? We'll take a train from the SeaTac Airport. Also, because it's only $3, we'll take a train from the airport to the city where we were going to stay a night before we embarked on the cruise and hopped on the ship. And so we did. And I couldn't believe I was so proud of myself for figuring out and navigating how to get on a city train, if you will. And it just zipped right to where we needed to get off. And it dropped us off right in the middle of the city. And I was, here I am taking selfies of every little element of our trip. Guys, get in this picture. This is amazing. We're on a train. You have no idea how scary and nerve-wracking and anxiety-ridden I am trying to get us on this train. But without a hiccup, we get on the train. We get to the middle of the city where we need to go, and we're in Seattle. Boom, just like that. Not gonna lie, a little bit of PTSD. I hadn't been to Seattle since we had left Colorado and moved to Tacoma unexpectedly and spent that year there. And I'd gone into the city a few times when we lived in Tacoma. And it was a little jarring to be back in the SeaTac, Seattle, Tacoma area. But it was a whole different experience. And we are in a whole different part of our lives. My God, the kids are all grown up and it's just completely different. Now we're here for pure pleasure. This is a very different experience. Well, we get off the train and there we are in the middle of the city. And we're walking. I thought this will be a great way for us to see the sights of Seattle. I don't know exactly where we are, but we are in the heart of the city. I do know that. And we have all our luggage, and we've only got a half mile to go to get from the train dropped us off to our hotel. And we walk with all of our luggage, and we're pulling one with a skateboard. Sandler doesn't go anywhere, even though we're going on a cruise. He doesn't go anywhere without a skateboard, so he's got a skateboard, and we're just dragging all of our bags. We stand out once again, and the kids are taking all the sights in, and we are walking by things. This is sort of enter in, as far as on the life school note, enter in the unintentional dare program and experience. We are walking by people who are smoking things that are completely unidentifiable. I just know they're not probably suggested or healthy. And then we run into a homeless man that's doing whatever he feels like he needs to do with his man area, and the kids' eyes are ginormous. And I'm just telling them, look ahead. Just look ahead. Keep your eye on the prize, which is the hotel. We're getting close. And they look a little frightened. They look a little uncomfortable. And I thought, you know what? This is good for them. This is good for them to see city life. This is good for them to experience this. We never felt unsafe, or I didn't feel unsafe, but I think it was good for them to see city life. I think it's good for them to see that not everybody lives like they do and where they do. And that was the heart of the city. We saw all walks of life from in that half-mile radius. And We get to the hotel, and I had hotwired the hotel, kind of won the hot lottery in the hotel. It's my birthday eve because we're leaving actually on my birthday. And we're about to embark on the first day of University of Life School for Bootsy, the first day of semester at sea for Sandler, and the first day of my year of 49. So I'm going into my last year in my 40s, and here's to it. And we had the best night. We end up on the 30th floor, so we've got this amazing view of Seattle, and it was gorgeous. Next day is the day we hop on the ship. That goes without any glitches. Get on that ship, priority boarding. I had also upgraded. We had the chance to upgrade, and I had upgraded us to a bigger room. And there we were. My first thought might have been, I think they just put mirrors up. I think that's how they made this look bigger. And I'm sure it was bigger. Again, I hadn't been on a cruise since the kids were little, so we take up more space now, the three of us. This just didn't feel very big. The most important thing to me was we were going to have a balcony, and there definitely was a balcony. I was pretty sure it said a bigger balcony, so I don't know how small the other balconies were, but it didn't matter. We had a balcony, and I could go outside. Sure, the bathroom was a little bit bigger, but we weren't on the luxury cruise of the world. We were on a Carnival cruise. The ship is just ginormous. They've got everything. There's basketball, there's miniature golf, there's the water slides. It just was going to be the trip of a lifetime. And I had prepared. I had my book. I was so excited to read a book. That was the one thing, the one luxury I made sure I got. I love reading books, but I never get the chance to read books. I never have alone time, and I can't put a book down. If I like a book, well, I won't. If I don't like a book, I don't get past the beginning part of it. But if I like a book, I can't put it down. And what would happen is I'd read a book into the wee hours of the night, and then I wouldn't get any sleep. So I very rarely give myself the luxury of reading because again, I have moderation problems as far as reading goes. And I was so excited, and I brought some journals to write in and do the things I don't do at home. So with eager anticipation, the ship sets sail, and the first day is a day at sea, and it's great. I figured it was going to take a while to get used to where things were on the ship and get comfortable with knowing which was the front, which was the back. And I don't know that we ever did get comfortable with that. Like it was always confusing to me. And I could rarely find things. And my biggest fear was going back to losing Sandler and the conga line was keep your eyes on Sandler. Bootsy too, of course, but mostly he's real quick. That one it's real quick to all of a sudden you see him 1 minute and then he's gone. And fortunately, his favorite thing to do was ride the glass elevator, which that was a bonus because at least I could see him going up and down in the elevator from wherever I was. That was sort of the to go point, the landmark of the ship. Well, I start really taking in, and my empathy got the best of me, and I started thinking to myself, why did you think going on a cruise was like the best idea? You're a claustrophobic person. You don't like crowds. You don't like necessarily waiting in lines for food. I'm not a huge foodie. I like food, but when it's not great food, there's just a plethora of it and people are waiting for hours and like lined up. That's just not my thing. And Bootsy didn't mind. She was really into the buffets, and she was really into the ice cream, the desserts, and the endless amounts. And that was great, and that was fine. But when there was the first day at sea and there's really nothing else to do, I'm already feeling like I've gained 5 pounds and we're on day one. But I let myself have that freedom of like, you just do whatever you want to do. And exhausted every activity on the ship. We did everything. And I'm just kind of taking in the crowd, and I'm taking in all the people, and I'm wondering why I thought this was going to be such a great idea. But I started my book and I started to take my time to sit outside, and I thought this is still going to be just awesome. Well, day two, for the most part of day two, we were still at sea. And then it was closer to lunchtime, and we got caught in our first big long lunch line. And we were kind of getting good already at the beginning of catching things before everybody lined up. We wake up a lot earlier than everybody else. We're not drinking, so no one's hungover. So we're kind of like the early birds of the trip. Again, this is kind of an older crowd, of course, and there aren't a lot of kids or my kids to buddy up with. For the most part, we kind of stuck to the three of us and got places before most people did, just because we were eager to go. Well, that second day was the day we were just on the water, and then by lunchtime we're sitting there, and I start noticing Bootsy's got some attitude, and Bootsy is my 19-year-old. Now in hindsight, she was definitely just being a teenager, and definitely being the teenager that was maybe out of her comfort zone. I think the highlight of her trip was to eat endless amounts of ice cream. And well, I just start noticing this attitude is taking place. And I'd gotten us binoculars. That's one thing a friend of mine suggested, and I thought that's probably a must. And I packed them just in case we were anywhere where it was time to get them out. And we get to the first part of the trip where we're sitting down having lunch, of course. At this point, 5 pounds in to the buffet. And I spot land. I spot mountains. And I kind of freak out. And I see everybody's sort of heading to one side of the ship. Now, my first instinct is to get nervous and uncomfortable and think, oh God, this is going to tip the ship. It's going to start leaning to the side. But then I'm like, what are they looking at? I need to get out there too. And I rush out there, and I see in the far, far distance a couple icebergs. Two. When I say a couple, two. And I run in and I grab Sandler, because one person had to stay at the table. We'll take turns. I'm going to take you outside. And I get him in those binoculars, and we focus in, zoom in. We can see the icebergs. And I'm thinking, this is so cool. He's just hugging me, thanking me. People are noticing. It's so endearing. He's just like, thank you for this. This is the best trip ever. And again, we're on day two. I rush in. I grab Bootsy. And she will not have anything to do with it. She doesn't want to leave that seat. She doesn't want to leave her meal. She doesn't want to get up and go. And she's so put out by it. We're surrounded by windows, but you can't see the icebergs. You need to have these binoculars. They're so far in the distance. Like, no, you're going to come out. And she's just refusing. And kind of the attitude of, what are you going to do about it? We're amongst like gazillions of people. What are you going to do about it? Throwing me this attitude. And I give her this look like, I have the capability of completely freaking out in public. Like, that's happened. I'll do it. It's going to happen now. Get outside. You're going to look at this iceberg. And she wouldn't do it. Finally, I get her to go outside, and she will not look through the binoculars, and she will not do anything. And I finally had to stop myself and say, this is her trip too. Why are you fighting this? You're making the first little smidge of something beautiful, or that you think is beautiful. She doesn't. I didn't separate it very well at the time because I was so pissed, because I'm like, I don't care if you don't think that's neat or not. You're going to enjoy it because dollar signs, I'm not going to lie, are going through my head. This shit's expensive. This trip is expensive. And she wasn't going to enjoy it. Well, that was just the beginning of her attitude and the beauty of Alaska. It was coming together at once. All of a sudden, I thought, you need to get back to the room. You need to get back on your balcony. That way you can enjoy the scenery. She can do whatever she wants to do. But I kind of put her in a timeout. I had not invested in the internet. That was almost my way of like punishing them. The one thing they were not going to be doing was connecting to the outside world. And I didn't need any connecting to Wi Fi. I didn't need social media. I didn't need any of that. I didn't need to see all of my friends' kids going to college and comparing myself to them. We were going to get all those photos, whether there were 900 frowns or pissed off faces. We'd get those good photos. I'd made signs for the kids even about their first day. Bitsy had one she had to hold up. That was first day at University of Life School, and I've always mocked the first day at school parents. A couple years ago, I literally didn't even know what grade it is, just right after COVID, and I made him hold up signs that said first day of I don't know what grade I'm in. And Sandler said for this trip, his was first day of semester at sea. And I was going to get those pictures come hell or high water, literally. Again, one of those uh, puns I can say now that we made it home safe and sound. But we get back to the room after catching those first two icebergs. And this is just the beginning. And I make Bootsy kind of sit there. And I said that because I had already sort of made them suffer without Wi-Fi, I said, you're not even to look at your phone. She likes to do this coloring thing on her phone where she just pushes buttons. I said, you're going to actually color. There you go. You have to color. I'm going to sit outside. You take your attitude and you know what? Just change it. Color. Color in your coloring books and no one bother me. All of a sudden, we're in the fjords at this point. We enter the most beautiful scenery I have ever witnessed in my entire life. There are icebergs just floating by us. I can see glaciers, mountains for days, waterfalls, green water, blue skies. Again, the entire trip, we had perfect weather, totally unexpected, very unusual, especially for that time of year. It was the closest. This is where the enter spiritual awakening. It's happening right now in this moment. Granted, my daughter's being awful, awful, awful. And her awful is very different from anybody else's awful. And the trick is, the tough thing is, she's 19, her brother's 15. They're very different kids. He's a go, 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 appreciates everything, thinks every day is the best day of his life. He can be a lot, he can be too much. She's the very content, very okay with everything, easygoing, doesn't need to be going there. She doesn't need a lot of stimulation. They're completely different personalities. They might have the same chromosomal diagnoses, but they are very, very different, as all people and all kids, all siblings are. However, in this case, it was a very tricky thing to juggle, but I set that in the room. I went outside on the balcony, shut that door. The door shut itself, and I took it all in. And I am having, honestly, this almost come to Jesus experience of just jaw-dropping scenery. Just, wow, this is nature. I get the feeling, I have always loved nature. I've always loved the escape of nature. When I was in Colorado, I was in the mountains and I loved being in the mountains. I loved being in the woods, in the trees. It wasn't until sort of closer to the time I left Colorado that I really became afraid of the bears and the mountain lions and those things. But I used to hike all over. We used to backcountry snowboard. We used to do all kinds of things that really, in hindsight, weren't probably the smartest things, but it was fearless in nature. I never was afraid in nature. And when I used to run a lot in Colorado, it was always, I loved trail running. I loved just being in the woods. I loved being away from everybody. The oxymoron. Here I am on a ship with a gazillion people scooted in together, but it didn't matter on our balcony. It didn't matter how big it was. It didn't matter how snazzy our room was. It didn't matter that our room was full of mirrors. It looked kind of like something retro from like a Vegas hotel from years ago, but it didn't matter. This was beautiful, and this was my take this in. Everything's going to be fine and okay. and perfect and great, because if anything says you got this, it's being in that position of just your grain of nothing. You're so small in this universe. So what you all your flaws, all the things that didn't go right in life, they don't mean anything, because this is so huge and nature's so much bigger. And what I love about where we live is we've got the ocean meets land, and it's beautiful, because when I get overwhelmed with life, I can go out to the beach and just look out at the ocean and kind of it's my therapy. It's my meditation. It's hard for me to calm down long enough to meditate, but there's something about nature that does it for me. So I'm like, yes, okay, we got this. Everything's going to be great. And eagerly anticipating our next day, because that's where we're actually going to get off the ship. We get off the ship and we are in Icy Strait Point. And that's the day we're going to go ziplining. And we get off and go, and it's fabulous. I started to wonder if that was what Bootsy had an attitude about, because I knew she was a little nervous about the zip line. She knew we were going on the zip line. And Icy Strait Point was great. It was great to be on land. I was already getting a little bit uncomfortable being on the ship. I wanted my feet to touch land. And we get there, and it was really designed for tourists. It was really designed, this stop was designed for, it was like an adventure center. So it had all the different onshore excursions. And we were doing the zip line thing. We had some time to kill. We walked around. We ended up finding this beautiful pier, a rock beach, little residences and little museum, and that was great. And the zip line was incredible. I'd never been on a zip line. The fastest, most incredible $160 per person I'd ever spent. But man, whew, back on the ship. And her attitude immediately kind of went back to this negative attitude. And what I didn't like was I started fighting it instead of just embracing it or just not caring. I started realizing a feeling of, whew, I love my kids equally. I love them equally. But man, I love them differently, because on I've got this one kid that's thanking me every 5 seconds, and he needs to go, go, go. And he thinks this is the greatest trip ever, but trying to keep up with him it's wearing me out. I mean, up and down on the glass elevators, and I need to go play putt-putt, and I need to be on this water slide. And then I've got this other one who just has this look of everything is bothering. It's not to say sometimes that look of disgust on her face was warranted, because I'm looking around thinking the same thing, but I'm also seeing the dollar signs I paid for this thing, and I thought, it doesn't matter if we think so. This is disgusting. We're going to enjoy every second of this trip. Well, then we get to Juneau as our next stop. And thank God we'd run into the people at the airport who had suggested that we go to the bar. So the only thing they wanted to do when we got off of the ship was play pool. What they were missing from home was playing pool. They love playing pool. And that almost pissed me off. I'm like, we're in Alaska. You don't look for a pool table in Alaska. Unfortunately, the bar that we were going to didn't have a pool table, or that would have probably been their favorite port, to be honest with you. And that was almost that. I remember a moment when I was at Disney World. I didn't have kids at the time, but I was working there for an event. And I remember I was laying out at the pool, and I heard the parents asking the kids what their favorite part of Disney World was. And the kids said, the days at the pool. And I thought to myself, God, I bet those parents are pissed they spent all this money when their kid's favorite day was the day at the pool. And I'm starting to get this feeling of like, God, my kids, the only thing they're missing out, the only thing they want to do in Juneau, Alaska is find a pool table. Like, that's kind of shitty. So we go to this bar that these friends had suggested, and I love it. Of course, we're at the bar at 10 o'clock. None of us drink alcohol, but it's definitely touristy, but you feel kind of local. It's got sawdust on the floor, taxidermy, little cans that say fish assholes. Like, I just think it's great. You write your name on the wall, leave your mark. We go and buy a couple friends some t-shirts, and it's great. But my kids wanted to get back on the ship. And I'm like, we're on land. This is Juneau. You don't want to get back on the ship. We just got off the ship. But they did. They weren't impressed. To them, it was just another town somewhere. It was surrounded by mountains and it was cool and it was pretty, but they wanted to get back on the ship where Bootsy could be in her comfort zone of endless amounts of desserts and food and sit there and be kind of in her zone, her teenage zone. And Sandler wanted to get back to swimming and doing all the thousands of activities that he had gotten accustomed to the last 3 days. So we get back on the ship, and this is when I start just feeling, I'm starting to feel a little claustrophobic. And I'm also thinking, if nothing else, these kids are really going to appreciate when we get home. They're going to appreciate home. They're going to appreciate the fact that we can just go out of the house, be on land. We've got water. We've got skate parks. We've got everything that we're comfortable with, but we've got it all at our palms. I think the interesting for me to be around mountains because it made me think so much of my life in Colorado and how glad I was to have sort of moved on from my life in Colorado, but still I could enjoy, and gosh, how much I love that part of nature. It's, I see it few and far between when we go to the mountains of California. But we get back on the ship and I'm feeling a little bit of angst. I'm feeling a lot of bit of kind of anxiety about them not enjoying it the way I sort of expected them to, especially my 19-year-old. Again, Sandler really did enjoy it, and we've got another stop, and it's in Ketchikan. But I get back on the boat, and it probably doesn't help that the book that I chose to bring along is the Glass Castle, and it's I there's so much of my relating to the person who wrote that because it's based off of a true story. It's her memoir, but it's about her childhood. And so I'm reading that, also reflecting on my entire life. Like I said, the whole trip, and for me, was a whole spiritual awakening where I'm thinking about my past and thinking about how far we've come. And here I am reflecting on the mountains and what my life was like in Colorado, and then the quick stint in Seattle area, and thinking about that year we spent in Seattle and just the crazy, and just reflecting on a lot of things and thinking, these kids have no idea how good they have it. And even thinking about just having seen that family and them taking their son to college, and all of these things are happening to me where I'm thinking, gosh, my life has turned out completely different than I ever expected. I was going to be that person that took my kid or kids to college, and that was going to be my life. That was going to be the life I believed I had or was going to live, and it's nothing like that. I mean, I let that shit go a long time ago, but it reminded me of what I had expected my life to go. And then I was thinking at this point, after visiting Juneau, I had expected this trip to Alaska to be so different than it was turning out to be. And that wasn't that it was a whole lot worse or a whole lot better. It was just very different. I had expected my daughter to really, even though I had done it on a cruise ship thinking they'll have the activities and fun and I'll have the scenery, I had expected them to take it all in and sort of appreciate it as much as I did. And I didn't expect to really realize how different they were. And so I'm trying to just like reel it all in. I start filling out my journals, and man, I realized I had so much on my mind. I had so much going on in my mind, good and bad, where I'm just like writing it, right. And I fill up a whole entire journal within a couple days. Well, then we stop in Ketchikan, and I'm thinking to myself, because her attitude, it is honestly at this point getting progressively worse. And I'm trying to be sensitive to the fact that she doesn't have her dog, which is her it's her best friend. It's her everything. Kevin is her guy. I mean, that is her everything. And she's a little out of her comfort zone. I'm trying to be sensitive to that, but I'm also seeing those dollar signs. I'm thinking, I financed this thing. Like, I still have to pay this shit off, and I don't might have to ask for a discount. This one isn't turning out exactly as I imagined. Well, we get to Ketchikan. Now, I had planned a surprise shore excursion, and it was to see a lumberjack show. Wasn't real certain what that was. It was the cheapest shore excursion I could find. It sounded great to me. I knew there weren't going to be a whole lot of single men on a cruise to Alaska in late August, but I thought, you know what? I think this is going to be our thing, and I think it sounds really entertaining for the kids. Again, it was the cheapest thing on the menu for excursions. So we get off in Ketchikan, and Ketchikan was really cute, a really awesome town. It was really enchanting and awesome. We get there early. Again, the weather's beautiful. What is there to complain about? The weather is perfect. And it was the most entertaining, awesome thing I'd ever seen. These guys, you've got these strapping lumberjacks. I mean, they climb ginormous logs for a living. They saw logs literally for a living, and they do this whole performance, and it's the coolest thing ever. And I had tacked on some axe throwing at the end. I thought the kids are going to love this. In my head, I'm thinking Bootsy's going to get all that aggression. Like, she's pissed about this trip, or she's not enjoying it, or whatever. She's got whatever teenage shit she's got going on in her head. She can take it all out. It's axe throwing after this. Not to mention she's 19 years old. Like, honey, look, you're surrounded by these muscular, big lumberjacks. This is like a 19-year-old girl's dream come true. It's certainly a 49-year-old mom's dream come true. Yeah, like, this is awesome. She was not impressed. Okay, that's a lie. She's kind of impressed. I kept catching glimpses. I'd look over, and she'd almost be smiling, and then she'd see me looking at her, and she'd change the look on her face real quick, like, no, I hate this. And I'd catch her again. No, I hate this. But it came time to axe throw. And that was, oh boy, I need to invest in an axe and a target because that was super amazing. Wouldn't have anything to do with it. So I said at that point, I was pissed. I'm like, you know what? I don't know what it is. I don't know what's going to make you happy. Fine. Don't participate. You're going to be the tripod. You are going to do something, and you're going to hold this camera, and I'm going to have one picture, one video where it's not my arm and me trying to get the look of perfect happy family vacation. Take the goddamn picture and just be the best tripod you can be, because at this point I don't have any words for that attitude of yours. We walk through the town. It's awesome. We get back on the ship because she couldn't get back on that ship fast enough, and I just was in my head trying my hardest to just calm down and think, gosh, try to see it from their perspective. They don't know the difference. They don't know what it's like to not have all of this opportunity and all this wonderfulness. And I got real quiet, and I started thinking to myself about what life school is going to look like when we get home. And this is where I say it was probably one of the greatest things to ever have happened to us. And because I started feeling so much angst about getting back home and about spending this much time together. Because when you're contained on that little vessel, you're really forced with the three of us in a room and like kind of, a little pod that's moving to each and everything together. I thought, through the events of the vacation, I'm trying to navigate all the two personalities. And one kid's just eager and anxiously awaiting every aspect of the trip, and then the other one's not impressed by anything. I thought, how are we going to navigate another year of life school? It was different. There was no choice right after COVID. That was just kind of sink or swim. Like, we figure it out. We just go with the flow. And then we were still figuring it out a year ago, still trying to get a schedule sort of lined out. Well, this time I'm like, we're older. How are we gonna make this work? And it was probably the best sort of exposure therapy to what I have going on in my life, to these two personalities, to both of them being special needs, meaning they have special needs. All people do, honestly. Everybody's got special needs, but these two in particular, I'm like, you better figure out real fast. You've got to redesign. This unit's got to be renovated. And that was when I came up with the analogy for our life. I'm like, you're going to go home and renovate because it's going to get messy before it's built, rebuilt beautifully. And so go home and start the renovation project. And that's exactly what I wrote down in my journal. And I finished my book, and I was so inspired by that book. I was inspired because not only could I relate to it and think, wow, this lady has a story to tell and her story is incredible, I could relate to the whole thing. And gosh, it was a trip full of epiphanies. It was a trip full of just insight and amazement. And I made myself a list of things that needed to be sort of addressed when we got home. And I had a long talk with Bootsy, and I just explained to her that it's not going to fly, and that I get not being amazed or amused by everything that we do, but we have the luxury to do this together. And then I finally explained to her that her buddy, who we ran into at the airport, was going to be dropped off at school across the country. And then his parents were going to fly back and go back to life as they knew it without him being here at all times. And he'd come back to visit for holidays probably, and then for summer maybe, and then eventually they go off to their own. So I was finally explaining sort of the evolution of what kids typically do her age. And even if they don't go to school, then a lot of them go and get jobs. I know a lot of them that don't go get jobs and still live at home, but I didn't share that part with her. I said, honey, this is what kids do. And I think it was the first time, well, I know it was the first time I had explained it to her, and it was the first time, fortunately, we had run into them, and I had that literal example to give to her, as along with the figurative and the explaining of it all. And I think that was probably the best thing that happened, so that she knew I was serious when I said, if we can't make it work, if we can't do this renovation project when we get home, and I can't figure out a way to make it work, we find somewhere where you can go and be miserable. If you want to choose to be miserable. I was raised in a house with miserable people. I made the choice to marry somebody that was miserable. I will not for the rest of my life spend another minute with somebody who's miserable. And if you think this is a miserable place to be, you are on a vacation. You are being fed endless amounts of food. You are seeing the most beautiful parts of the world, as far as I'm concerned, because that's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. The country, Alaska, and Alaska from the water. Then we're not going to spend time together when we get home. And I think it really resonated. I think it was a hard conversation. I know it was a hard conversation for me to have, and I think it was a hard conversation for her to hear. But it finally resonated. And I think she understood when I explained where her buddy was going, that I wasn't an empty threat. So many of my threats are empty threats. But that was a huge milestone in our life. And it also was an extremely therapeutic, almost cathartic, but again, in an exposure therapy kind of way, point for me to realize I needed the reboot. And as much as I expected this to be the reboot and oh my gosh, I'm going to gear up, this is going to be a fun way to enter the last year of my 40s. It was an interesting way to enter the last year of my 40s, because it was a holy shit. Here's your life, and you're going to focus on it for this entire week on this ship, and you're not going anywhere. You're not going to escape what you really have to deal with. Like, this is it. This is your pod. These are your peas in the pod, and you're going to figure out how to make it work. So it was time for us to get home. So we get back to Seattle. We certainly didn't need another night in Seattle, but I think it just made us even all the more happier to be going home. And we got the same hotel. We did hit the lottery with the hot wiring of hotels because we got the same hotel and another great room. And I immediately let the kids, the first thing I let them do was go on internet. And they actually appreciated it so much more. I think they realized real quick what suffering in today's day and age is like, and that's no internet for a week. And so I let them go. None of us said a word to each other. And we just got on our phones. And I had made myself a promise in all that. Have I followed through? Not completely, but I made myself a promise to really try my hardest to disconnect from social media and going down the rabbit hole of Googling people and things that I don't even know or care about. In 5 seconds after I've looked at it and looked at that person, I have no idea who it is. It's some celebrity that's caused me to look at something else, or like a cast of, I'm notoriously known for looking up casts of movies. And then I'll start looking into the casts, families, or other movies they've been in. And all of a sudden I'm on somebody I have no idea who this person is, why, how I got there. And I'm sure I'm not alone, or that's not a unique story, but just useless, endless amounts of time clicking on things. And I had made myself that promise. But the one thing I did, as soon as the kids were just, no one was talking for the first time ever, I looked up the author of The Glass Castle because I couldn't wait. As soon as I finished that book, I could not wait to see who she was in real life and to read more about her as a person. And today's special edition, which I'm going to introduce now, special edition with my little cheer from my past. That's extra, extra, read all about it. We got the best team, no doubt about it. But in this case, we got the craziest stories, no doubt about it. This special edition is sort of me telling everybody they must read this book by Jeanette Walls, The Glass Castle. This is the one I read during my life-changing experience on my trip to Alaska. For me, reading someone's story, I never realized, if it's somebody else's story, how incredibly intriguing it could be. Now, I could relate to a lot of this, but it's not even that. I think for me, it was her telling such painfully true accounts of her story growing up. And I thought, wow. And I sort of reflected on what I've been doing with this podcast because I realize I've told these various tales about my life. And there are things I've brought up things that I haven't thought of for years, or that I've got this beautiful built-in amnesia that allows me to forget a lot of things that have happened to me from my past, and then I'll discuss it, and I'll replay it, and I'll process it, and I'll think about it, and then I feel like it's very cathartic for me. I'll feel like I've really kind of worked some shit out, and reading this, I immediately looked her up and I came across this quote. It was in an article. And she had said, and she's talking about how she'd written this, and she had said, "You have to take my mother's advice and just tell the truth. If there's something so horrible and so painful you cannot imagine putting it down in words, that means you must." And I feel like I've done that. I feel like this is episode 18. And so the last 17 episodes, well, and then including this one, the last 18, I have told stories about my past. I have told lots and lots of stories. I've aired my dirty laundry. It's no secret. That's what this whole podcast is about. But I also have had comments from people that know me well, and know a lot of these stories, and then hear me tell it on this platform. And a few people have said, "My gosh, you do it you talk about that person, or it fairly diplomatically, and you've kind of missed you missed that element or you've missed this element. And I thought, oh, there's so many more episodes to go. Of course it'll come out. But I think going forward and with being inspired by this author, Jeanette Walls, and just being inspired by our trip, to be honest with you, I think going forward, just as I've cut out sugar, now that I gained on that trip probably 10 pounds between having that boot on my ankle for the last 5 months. I did leave the boot on the boat. So over that boot, that stupid boot. I had it on until Alaska and I left that sucker on that ship. Everything was left behind that I didn't like anymore. It's surprising my kids made it home with me. But I decided I was going to sort of eliminate a lot of the sugar out of my life. And so I have made myself a promise and going forward with the next episodes in the future, I'm going to try not to sugarcoat as much. I think I've done a pretty good job of not sugarcoating, but I know what these people are pointing out and talking about. So I just want to forewarn and prepare everybody that I will be eliminating some of the sugarcoating of future episodes. Please tune in next week for the episode about not fitting in anywhere, but fitting in everywhere. Please like, follow, share, and subscribe. You can find me on YouTube, Adult Chicken. You can also find me on adultchicken.com. Make sure you get the .com in there, as well as Apple and Spotify podcasts at Adult Chicken. You can also find me on Instagram and TikTok, adult_chicken.